I have been in this business a long time, which is another way of saying I am old. But beyond being old, most of the people that I have the honor and privilege of working with are just brilliant minds. They're just brilliant minds. And, we got Chester Elton coming up on the live stream soon. And there's so many amazing humans that I get to work with. Not many of them even hold a candle to the individual you're about to meet today. The other fascinating part about him, unlike a lot of authors in this space, is he is the transformationalist. He's the one who goes in and makes brands better. He understands the neuropsychology behind human choice, what is memorable, how to emotionally connect at a level with the consumer like no one else in the world. We have to go all the way to the Netherlands to find him, the Danish author, the extraordinaire Martin Lindstrom. We are here today to talk about our books. We're going to be both releasing books at the same time, and you're so gracious. I simply said, "Can you help me?" And you said, "How?" And so here we are today. I wanted to make sure we could talk about your book as well as mine. So, how are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm enjoying life, I have to say. And most importantly, I just use this crazy moment in the world as a good opportunity to reinvent myself at the same time. So for the first time in my life, I'm not just giving other people advice, I'm taking my own medicine. Can you believe it?
Wow. Yeah. Dr. Heal Thyself. I mean, we never have time for that. We're always on planes, right? It's always a function of just trying to get to through baggage claim. So let's talk about your journey, because to me, it is fabulously interesting, the impact you've had through your books. As you're talking about this, I will pop up a whole series of books, and I can't get them all on here over the course of our time, or this thing would go on for days. But just tell me a little bit about, how did you get to this place where people wait for your next book because they know it's going to be this, contrarian, unexpected view of consumers and how to make businesses great?
Well, listen, Joseph, I think it's something I developed over time. I mean, in the old days, what happened was that, and I'll just move my little camera here. The old days, what happened was that I would focus on aspects around branding. But I realized you cannot become the #1 branding guy in the world if you don't have the credibility. So over the years, what I did was to go around the periphery of branding. I created brand sense, as you can see on the screen right now. I created Buyology. I created Brand Child, Brand Washed. All of it was different aspects of branding. And really what I did was to combine two ordinary things in a new way. And what happened over the years was that slowly I got the credibility of being Mr. Branding. So it's taking a long time. This is the 8th book I'm publishing right now. And really, all of them are looking at completely different aspects of how to build brands in a powerful way. And you know what? It's taken 20 years to get to that point. And I still do not feel I'm there yet. It's like a work in progress, right?
Yeah, you're a 20-year overnight success, Martin. It's pretty amazing. Well, but the new book is so exciting. First, the tie-in to my book that'll be out later very shortly is how much red tape there is. And if anything, in talking to many of the leaders that I did in the context of my new book, Stronger Through Adversity, is that they actually cut some of this red tape that they thought was holding the organization together. But in point of fact, it was keeping them back. So talk to me about the new book and what people can expect from this. So giving them a big preview here.
I mean, why has a simple action like buying office equipment turned into a 6-people committee decision followed by a 5-level approval process? That's my starting point, right? I mean, as I tend to say, and I'm actually writing this in the book, that when a 264-page PowerPoint presentation kicks off with "Welcome to our Christmas party planning committee meeting," then I personally think it's time to reach out to the Ministry of Common Sense and get some serious help. And that's really where I am. I have been working so much with corporations around the world, and time after time, when we wanted to transform an organization, I realized that really the issue here was that these companies, they were stuck with all the bureaucracy. They could not innovate anymore. They did not have an ability to have creativity floating through the system. Instead, they were held back by red tape and bureaucracy. So for me, really to create an environment which will make these ideas thrive, I decided to do something crazy. So in partnership with a major bank, we actually established the Ministry of Common Sense inside the organization. And I'm not kidding. This is crazy stuff. And what happened as a consequence of that was that we, through the first year, it basically identified more than 1,000 crazy rules and killed them, and really kind of let go of that stretch jacket as most companies have. And today, the Ministry of Common Sense is running in multiple companies around the world, all with one single purpose: to make life better for an employee and to make the company more innovative.
Yeah, I gotta tell you that I'm kind of blown away by this. I think it was Will Rogers who said that common sense isn't so common, right? And if anything, to go to almost an absurdity, right? I mean, it seems absurd on the face that you would put together this actual ministry of common sense, and then with that structure, to be able to uncover all of the inherent absurdity in the way that business is done. I mean, it almost has to go to the extreme to be able to see the extreme.
I think you're right. I think the issue here is that if you assume we can deal with issues the same way as we did in the past pre-COVID-19, I think you're wrong. First of all, I do think that COVID-19, for good and for worse, is the moment for us to step up and ask ourselves, what should we fundamentally change in the way we do business? Think about it. As we're all stuck behind a screen now, as we all basically living a life which is back-to-back in Zoom meetings and team meetings, you also have opened up a door to a huge, gigantic pipeline of bureaucracy going straight into your bedroom. And that means that all the problems we had in the past will go into your private life. And my fundamental question is this. First of all, what would you change if you should change things? Why do we adopt all the problems we had in the past? Why don't we use COVID-19 to change the way we work? And number two is, how do we ensure we remove all this red tape, which is making our life miserable? And what we did with the Ministry of Common Sense is actually to create a very simple model where you actually make it profitable. I'm not kidding. Really what happens is the companies are able to earn money by removing problems inside the organization. And I want to give you one single example, which I think is kind of cool. So here's the example. The example is that we actually created a partnership with Toyota, the car company in Japan. And they said to us, we want to be an environmental friendly organization. We want to make things that very efficient at the same time, but we don't know how to do it. So we created an internal competition. The competition was to find out how we could save money and save the environment at the same time. Now, one brilliant person came up with an idea. He literally said, why don't we switch off all the lights in the production plants? Now, all the lights in the production plants, I mean, that doesn't make sense. People had to work in the dark. No. At Toyota, they don't have people working in the factories. It's all robots. So why do you have the light on anyway, right? So they actually saved millions of dollars doing that. It's a Ministry of Common Sense. And that's really my point, that you really you can use creativity to optimize your organization and make life easier, right?
Well, but see, I think, how long have the lights always been on, right? I mean, it is such a part of the legacy of the way things have always been done that no one has actually even asked the common sense question anymore. It's de facto baked into the experience. And, in the context of my new book, a lot of what we saw happening was brands that were really very much legacy oriented. They had lots of gravitas, lots of brand equity built in. they were so reluctant to truly be innovative. They could have an innovation committee, but it had to be any ideas from it got squelched by 5 layers of bureaucracy. So what we started to see out of the necessity of the pandemic was that many times these brands they had to. There was who cared about what your legacy was? You cared about whether or not you could literally keep your lights on tomorrow. And so I think we saw entrepreneurial behavior, and maybe that's part of common sense, is that when you really have to make payroll tomorrow, it's different than when you're worried about what you achieved from yesterday. I'd love to get your thoughts on, maybe it's not even true. Maybe entrepreneurs aren't any more commonsensical than legacy brands, but certainly legacy brands became more entrepreneurial.
Well, I think it's a very good point. Here's the issue with all this stuff. The issue is that there is a direct correlation between common sense and empathy. Now, that sounds crazy, but let me just explain what I mean. Empathy is your ability to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and feel and experience what he or she is feeling. That's empathy. We are increasingly losing that skill set. And this is fascinating insight. Think about this. When we were monkeys, hundreds and thousands of years ago, the reason why we survived ahead of any other species was because our brain had the ability to create a sense of empathy. Now, that's a reason why a polar bear takes 15 generations to adapt to a change in global environment, where we do it within the same generation. Now, here's the frightening part. What we can see now from all sorts of studies, and there was a recent study published just a couple of months ago showing that the degree of empathy among young people, students and millennials in the US has dropped 50% over the last decade. Why? Well, it's very simple why. We try to express our emotions using 100+ characters on Twitter. In fact, there's something else happening on top of that. Botox is the reason why we lose empathy, because if I put in Botox, I lose my micro expressions. And the study is now showing that parents' relationship, mothers' relationship to their babies is actually downgraded right now because babies cannot relate to the moms when they don't have these micro expressions. So what I'm trying to say here is empathy is disappearing. Now, why is that relevant inside an organization? It's relevant because it is my ability to work with other people, work with other divisions, other functions. The silos are basically broken down because I have respect for the other people. But what has happened over the years as big conglomerates are growing, we create silos. Each silo has its own set of KPIs because we had to feed it to Wall Street so they can be happy and we can give them revenue announcements on a quarterly basis. And what happens is these silos are happening inside the organization, making us less interested in working together. And as a consequence of that, what happens is that we suddenly are forgetting who's our boss. Our boss suddenly becomes ourself, my boss, my department head, rather than the customer and the consumer. So the difference between a conglomerate, a good old corporation, a commodity, is that they slowly are losing sight of who's paying the salary, whereas an entrepreneur still remember it. And they remember it because they most likely had the problem themselves and found a solution to it. And therefore, they're very, very close to that feeling. And that is infused through the DNA of the organization. And that's a profound difference between corporations and entrepreneurs.
Wow. Okay. So you took my idea and then you took it out to polar bears and moved it through Botox. I could have not seen it coming, but that's Martin Lindstrom. That's what happens when you read your book. Like all of a sudden, any of your books, I mean, we've got so many to choose from, but I strongly remember Buyology, and I would just be going down some lane and then boom, there's a neuropsychological principle that's being applied to really practically applied to what I need to do in my business. And it is no wonder that you have carved out the niche in this industry that you have. And so I wait for your books to come out, and then I buy copious quantities, and then I hand them out to all kinds of people, many of whom we've worked with together. I was thinking in the context of my new book, I might as well go ahead and pop up my book, since we're this is intended to be partly a shared promotion for both of us. So I don't know where my camera is, but Stronger Through Adversity is coming out. But in it, for example, I quote Ed Mady And Ed Mendy is a phenomenal leader of the Beverly Hills Hotel,
Yes.
which is part of the Dorchester collection. And so our worlds come together in the context of that. You have been instrumental in the Beverly Hills Hotel of researching the backstory of the rooms to create that narrative that's essential. But I think, again, these are all common sense ideas in some way, right? The common sense of us being historically storytellers and wanting to connect to this lineage of story. It has that polar bear hieroglyphics sort of intersection moment. So talk to me a little bit about how you actually take the ideas that you use and you put them into books, but also how you take them out of the books and apply them into the real life of the people that you work with.
Well, one of the things we work with at the Dorchester Collection, which is, as you point out, Beverly Hills Hotel, it's Bel Air Hotel, and a range of other luxury hotels and properties around the world. One of the things we wanted to do was to find a true point of differentiation. Now, I don't know if you know these stats, but there's around 15,000 luxury suites around the world. The only problem is suite has been watered down. Everyone believes they have a suite. Even the Holiday Inn around the corner have their own suite. So Beverly Hills Hotel and Bel Air and the rest of the group wanted to find a true point of differentiation because they really do have the suite. So here's what I did. The first thing we did was to spend time in the hotel talking to the guest, talking to the housekeeping, talking to the front office manager, talking to all these amazing people which are working there 24/7. We wanted to understand how they experience the world through the eyes of the staff, but also through the eyes of the customer. And then we did something extraordinary. We actually adopted a philosophy from Alfred Hitchcock. When Alfred Hitchcock was producing his movies, he always worked with two manuscripts. He had the green script and he had the blue script. The green script is how you should feel. The blue script is what's happening. So it means blue script wise, here you have the props, here you have the light, here you have the sound, here the monologue, here you have the dialogue. That's a blue script. But the green script is exactly how you should feel. He should feel scared. He should feel a sense of empathy. He should feel harmony. He should feel in love. And minute by minute, Alfred Hitchcock would map down exactly how you should feel. And we took that idea and adopted it into the hotels across the world. And then we did a second thing. We started to do some research. And we realized that what people really remember when they are checking into an amazing hotel is the experience. It's the feeling. It is the feeling of someone else actually was here 200 years ago and had an amazing experience. We realized, in fact, that almost every suite at Dorchester Collection, whether that's Beverly Hills Hotel or Bel Air Hotel, actually have an amazing story. In that room, that was the first room where Marilyn Monroe did her last shoot. This room was where Frank Sinatra, he was playing New York, New York for the first time. In that room, Whitney Houston actually got drunk and later on picked up her first boyfriend. These are the stories. So with the permission from the estates, we actually created a narrative around each of the rooms. So when you click the doorbell, it has the sound of that song, which was composed in that room by Frank Sinatra. And when you lie in the bed, you will actually have the cologne, which he always used free of charge. And on the turn down service, you will have the small chocolates, and it will have a little piece of message saying, on this day, Marilyn Monroe and JF Kennedy actually met up, and that was the day where Pearl Harbor was attacked exactly this many years ago. And here's a piece of that story. So suddenly you're not buying a suite, you're buying an experience. We are creating the green script. And all of that really came back to the idea of saying, I don't want to sell a bed. I don't want to sell a window, or we have an extra minibar. People don't care when they have that amount of money. What they care about is an experience. And that's really another format of common sense.
All right. So I'm going to restate my question, because first off, that was so profound and I'm like completely gone by the wayside with it. But how is it that you take what you learn and apply it, or do you apply it and then write about it? I mean, I think there's a certain, which came first, chicken, egg? Where in the heck does Alfred Hitchcock enter your brain sufficient to be metaphoric to your practice of improving brand experience. I guess I'm just mystified by how your brain works, because I think it's why we probably don't really, most people probably don't analyze your brain, sorry, but we're intrigued by you because you take these disparate threads, you make them accessible, and then you apply them. And I'm just trying to get some kind of insight from you about how does this all synthesize inside of the person of Martin?
Thank you. You make me blush now, right? But I think the long story short here is this is a trick for you and for everyone watching. I've learned that the best way you can sell in ideas, the best way you can make progress happening in an organization is to adopt metaphors. And I'm going to tell you a little metaphor around that. There's an experiment done with chickens some years ago. And chickens were put into a cage, stuck in it for half a year. And one day these gates were opened to the beautiful green grass, and the chickens went out on the grass. The sun was shining, the birds were singing. And guess what happened? The chickens went out, and after 30 seconds, they went straight back in again. I call that for the chicken cage syndrome. And why do I tell you about that? There's two reasons why. The first reason is it's a way for me to illustrate how culture works in an organization, how we all have an ability to say, I really want to be progress, I want to be innovative, but in reality, when push comes to shove, we don't want to do it. We are afraid of the unknown, so we are afraid of change. Now, the only way I can explain that in a way where people can smile at the same time and perhaps say to themselves, there's something about it, is to use a metaphor, which comes back to the second point. Do me a favor, whenever you want to make a change in an organization, whenever you want to communicate something, tap into the power of metaphors. Why? Because they have pre-existing equity already infused into a way of thinking. It's almost like if you were to walk into a forest and there's already a lot of grass and stuff, and you're taking the first path and it's really difficult, but the second person will find it easy and the third one will find it easy and so forth, because you've seen that the pathway works. Now, when you use metaphors, you apply a framework of thinking on top of something which is unknown for people. And because they kind of feel somewhat familiar with this way of thinking through the metaphor, they're willing to go into an unknown space. So long story short here, because I'm using another metaphor on top of a metaphor, right? But what I'm saying to you is I always search for metaphors in everything I do. And I do that because it helps me to communicate things. So in the case with the blue script and the green script, I learned about the story doing a lot of research, but I learned about it because I realized that we do not communicate emotions in hotels. And I said to myself, we're in the middle of Hollywood right now. They're all about emotions. They're all about sending trends around the world. What is the trick they did? And how can we use that as a key learning to build new hotel suite experiences? And then we did a lot of research. We found that metaphor and applied it, and now it really works for companies around the world. But it really began in Hollywood originally.
I see that. To me, that's the linchpin that I was missing. I was missing in the Beverly Hills Hotel, Bel Air Hotel experience, that the Hitchcock idea was metaphorical to place. So it had place relevance, which is something, I mean, if you study the career arc of Martin Lindstrom, you'll see there's a lot about story. There's a lot about metaphor. There's a lot about sensory engagement. I'm probably missing 20 other lot abouts, but those are really recurring motifs applied with incredible insight. And even now, and I'll pop this up since we're both doing book launches in the very near future, even now in the Ministry of Common Sense, a lot of the things that are holding back story or metaphor or sensory experience are these bureaucratic, red tapey sort of processes. His book will be out in January of 2021. Mine will be out in December of 2020. We're talking about the Dorchester Collection and the Beverly Hills Hotel, which is relevant to both my book and his. So one of those moments. All right, so let's talk about the upcoming book, The Ministry of Common Sense. You create this department, this phenomena organizationally within this bank. It clarifies and removes all types of silliness that's built in, absence of common sense. And what's the throughput to me? I mean, am I gonna create a whole bureaucracy around anti-bureaucracy? What's the implication?
Well, that's a good question. No, the Minister of Common Sense is a little bit like the Minority Report. No, sorry, not Minority Report, but Mission Impossible, where Tom Cruise is getting this device and it explodes or destroys itself within 10 seconds. Well, that's the Minister of Common Sense. The Minister of Common Sense is only relevant as long as it has a role. It's not meant to be permanent. And in fact, with some of our clients, it still works. And in other cases, it doesn't work because we fixed all the issues inside. But let me tell you a story about why this is so powerful. A couple of years ago, we teamed up with Maersk. Maersk is the largest shipping company in the world. They sit on 21% of all trade globally. And I went to China to understand why the NPS score, which is Net Promoter Score, the customer satisfaction, why that was so low as it was. And we couldn't really understand why. So I was sitting in the call center listening into all these calls. And one of the things I realized when people were calling and complaining was that every time people called into the call center, they would address this immediately and they'll tick one little box. And guess what the box was? Force majeure. Force majeure, you know, the whole idea about an earthquake or COVID-19, that was really what was going on. People literally said, this is force majeure. Every time there was a complaint into Maersk, that's the box that would tick. And I was wondering, why is that happening? And we realized if you tick one box, you can fill out the form in a matter of 2 minutes. But if you don't tick it, you have to go through another 3 pages, and that turnaround of that customer will take another 10 or 15 minutes. So it's a time issue. Now, here is the issue around this whole topic. Why did they do it? Because the KPIs on the customer service department was not based on satisfaction. It was based on time. They were measured on how quickly could they turn around a customer. And even worse, when you click force majeure, and that becomes the bookmark for that complaint, the customer can't reimburse it against the insurance company. So you had a double unhappy customer. And this is very much an issue I've noticed time after time as we work with organizations, that you have these invisible roadblocks, or what I call a straitjacket inside the organization, holding people back from change because they see the world from a different point of view, the wrong point of view. So the purpose of a Ministry of Common Sense is to vacuum clean this up. And no, you don't need to start up a ministry. It's a very good initiative if you're serious about it, but you actually can do something else. And this brings me back to the chickens and the chicken cage, right? This is a question for you, Joseph. So imagine that you actually are having these chickens now. They're walking out on the grass and now they're walking back again. Now imagine I have 4 chicken cages, okay? They're all open. The chickens are sitting in there, and they're in a round circle, and you have sort of a square in the middle. If you had a piece of corn or some corn, where would you place the corn to get the chickens out of the chicken cage?
Well, I would think if you're saying they're in a circle, I'm thinking in the middle of a circle, but it's probably not right. I have no idea. I wish you had. Can I forget that we're doing this interview with Martin Lindstrom? Okay, go ahead. Yes. So where would you put the corn, Martin?
You would place it just in front of the chicken cage, each of the cages, and I'll explain why. Think about this.
Absolutely. It's definitely operant conditioning, right? You're going to just do a little bit outside of the cage.
Exactly. Because here's the issue. If I'm standing inside the cage, I'm a chicken, I'm looking at the other ones, there's a piece of corn in the middle. I'm thinking, gee, that's very far away. That is this CEO's 5-year plan, and he's asking for innovation, but it requires you to go outside your normal behavior. And by the way, there's no KPIs attached to it, and there's no bonus attached to it. So you look at the other chicken, and the chicken's thinking, I'm not going to do it because he's not going to do it, and she's not going to do it because he's not doing it. So they all go straight back in again. The trick by placing a piece of corn straight out of the cage is that you can take it. Everyone is looking at everyone. Oh, they were not fired. It worked. And then you celebrate the hell out of it. And if I translate this into a corporate environment, I call that a 90-day intervention. It's the idea about that you create an intervention. It only takes 90 days, and you have to have an immediate success after 90 days. And then you have to celebrate it in the whole organization. So everyone says, my gosh, this is really the way to do things. It kind of cements a behavioral change. It makes sure you don't go back to what I call the default behavior. And that's exactly what we learn when we do these changes in organizations. You have to break it down to 90-day interventions, placing the corn outside and slowly make the chickens behave differently. That's exactly what you've seen during COVID-19. During COVID-19, people said, it will change. Next month, it will be normal again. And then after a normal month, no, another month and another month. And it's first now people kind of are realizing this actually may be forever. But it took us 9 months to realize it. Whereas those people which immediately said, you know what, there's a change going on here. They have created completely new business models. They're ahead of everyone else. And in fact, they've adopted to the change. And that's really the essence of change management, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because as I think about kind of what I'm doing with my book, I can never get to my camera the way you do. You're so much more emotionally tuned in. You've got your blue script working. I think about some of the things that I heard from leaders because I interviewed 140 of them for the book that I'll be releasing here shortly. And in it, they said very much the same. We might use terms like ecosystem assessments or, all kinds of change readiness strategy. But when you get right down to it, the reality of it is that you just need to kind of get people to peek their head out of the chicken coop to believe there's a better and brighter and more hopeful future out there somewhere for those who are willing to take control of that and seize it now, which clearly.
So Joseph, tell me, what is the one story you have picked up in your conversations with 100+ CEOs, which struck you as being a clever way of getting the chickens out of the chicken cage?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's maybe a way of getting the chickens the leading chickens to behave. So, and it's a metaphor. So I'm using this example because you put pressure on me to have a metaphor. And it's wild horse herds. So, probably all I need to say, right, Martin? Everything's obvious then. No, let me give you a little more detail. So the wild horse herds element of it is that, in this pandemic, leaders had to be willing to be much more flexible in their leadership style. So they kind of had to get out of the cage that they were most comfortable in. And the leadership style is typically either to lead from the front or to lead from the middle or to lead from the rear. And what we saw was, as in the case of wild horse herds, where you have an alpha mare out front, who's leading the way, creating the vision, saying we're taking the hill. There's my 5-year plan, and you have the alpha sire in the back, kind of keeping the herd moving. If there's any danger from the rear, they pick up the pace. There's also these horses inside the herd that shape herd behavior and keep the horses from getting too wide in the way they behave, and align themselves to make sure there's not a lot of foment in the herd. What ends up happening, fascinatingly, in the pandemic is you have to slide in and out of this. There were times you as a leader had to say, poke your head out. There is some safety. We're going to take this course. There were times you had to be in the back and you had to speak last. You could not be the one who spoke first because you killed ideation and innovation, right? So you had to be back there just nudging it along. And then there were times you just had to fall into the middle. Michelle Gass, who's CEO of Kohl's, told me that she had to be there when they reopened the Kohl's stores because she couldn't ask people to do something that she was unwilling to do as a leader. So for me, the metaphor is a wild horse herds. It's not Alfred Hitchcock. It's not the swimming pool example that you use so aptly in small data. It is a horse herd. And I think we have to realize the wisdom is in their multi-levels of leaders that move swiftly in and out. So there you go. I got to tell Martin Lindstrom one of my metaphors. That's
I love it. Well done. Now, listen, I think the most important for everyone, let me tell you a story, which I think is kind of fascinating. The story is really this, that you need to create an artificial pressure within the organization, which makes people feel a sense of urgency. I'll give you an example. Back in the days, many years ago, working with Lego, in 1994, that was the year where the World Wide Web was invented, so the internet we know today. And I remember I said to the management, hey guys, imagine that plastic would be banned. Imagine that you're not allowed to use plastic anymore for two reasons. One would be everything is going to be digital, and the second reason is it's going to destroy the environment. So, with those two things in mind, I would like us to simulate how Lego can survive without plastic. I mean, this is a serious task you're giving people because really everything they do is all about plastic, right? So, of course, they fired me, but after a couple of years, they came back and we started to simulate that. And I think the issue is that helped Lego to migrate partly towards the Lego movie later on and towards the whole digital strategy they have, where they're one of the biggest gaming players in the world at the moment. Do me a favor. COVID-19 is the moment for you to transform your organization. And you can use it as a good excuse. Now, I'm not saying you should be evil here in any shape or form, but I'm saying to you, you can use it as a sense of urgency in order to create a change in your organization. I'll give you an example. I was just recently working with one of the largest food distribution companies in the world. I said to them, hey, you have thousands and thousands of reps on the road. I know they're still going out right now selling to all the stores across the world, but why don't we simulate now that all face-to-face in the physical world is gone? I'm not saying this is where we want to go. I want to stress that, but I'm saying let's do it. And what was interesting was the first thing people said, no, we don't want to do that. Okay. I said, let's just do a math here. How much time do you spend in a car as a rep to get out to the customer on average? Well, guess what? On average, they would spend 9 hours in a car for a meeting, which is 1 hour. That means it's one meeting per day and they're exhausted. I said, what if we do something differently? We actually say to people, why don't you give them 6 hours of customer service? We help them with things, we do things which are clever, all that stuff. And in return, we're not seeing them that often. We see them through another type of channel, unless we want to be physical and share samples and whatever. And that is the mindset I would like everyone to have in mind right now, that use COVID-19 to reset the way we did everything in life. And that means, why do you have an annual conference for your employees? It's ridiculous online. No one want to be online for 3 days, right? Why did you break it down? I'll give you an example. A very big gaming company in the world, they said to me, we measure the culture temperature in our organization every day. And as soon as the culture goes under a certain threshold, we run a special event where we energize people. Okay, that means we probably have an event every third week sometimes, but we only do it for 2 hours. It's really engaging and really fun, but we are adapting to the new reality of us sitting behind a screen. That is what I mean. That's common sense. But because we stuck into our chicken cage, we want to clinch on to what's safe. But guess what? It's not safe to be in the chicken cage anymore because it defines a frame of comfort around you. And that's certainly not change willing, right?
Hey, Martin, I just think I need to coach you a little bit. You need a little more animation and a little emotion. You gotta get a little more passionate.
I apologize.
People are never going to get you unless you show a little emotion. You know, I love that example. You know, having worked with Tony Hsieh in Zappos and written the Zappos experience, you know, they got to that happiness survey every month, the monthly happiness evaluation. And this was a time when everybody was doing the annual employee engagement survey, right? So, and I think if you look at what's happening in Stronger Through Adversity, we see lots more pulse surveying of what your employees want, what your customers want, a lot more real-time data that you can then leverage instead of wait to, you know, see how many people are completely burned out by the annual employee engagement event. And then we'll do 3 days to, you know, get them excited at the first hour and excited at the last hour, but about 2 days of worthless content. So I really see this rethinking of business, internal and external, as a gift of COVID-19. And there aren't many gifts in this thing. And God knows I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, but if it's here, some people are going to turn it into something fabulous and others are going to just fade away. And so your book about the Ministry of Common Sense, that's the Minister of Common Sense, it's about that notion that you can relook at everything through the lens of utility and value to every human being it touches. I mean, that's kind of the upshot in the end, right?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think you're right here. I mean, all this came is rooted back in the philosophy I have, is to spend time with customers and consumers and see the world through their point of view. And it's something I'm doing a lot. And I spend a tremendous amount of time with customers today, not physically, but I then do it through Zoom calls where we zoom into people's bedrooms or into the kitchen and we look at how they behave. And all this stuff is actually the foundation for me securing enough insight to design a product around it. And let me just give you an example of that. So one of our clients is a large pharma client. And they are one of the leaders in the respiratory field. So if you have asthma or respiratory problems, they have the medicine for that. Now, I asked them when we started to work with them, how many patients have you interviewed through the years? They've been around for nearly 100 years. 0. They said 0. They said, you must be kidding. I said, why? Well, we can't do it because of compliance. I said, you must be kidding. That's not true. So I spoke to compliance. Sure enough, compliance was pushing against it, but I thought, why not fight for it? So we began an internal process. We changed it. Compliance allowed us to go into patients' homes with the pharma clients attending. And here's the interesting thing. As we go into a home of a young girl, I'm asking her about how she feels like when she has asthma. And she says to me, listen, it's horrible. Beside the disease, I also feel like I'm an outsider. I feel like people look down at me. So I said to her, listen, what do you do to overcome that? And she says, listen, one of the things I do is to give people a straw. I said, straw? Yeah. And I asked people to breathe through the straw, close their eyes, and I asked them to do that for a minute. I say, why? She said, because that's how it feels like to have asthma. So I took that idea to the senior management. We had everyone in at the board level they had to breathe through the straw. Light was switched off. We were playing some sound in the room of a heavy breathing person like this, that feeling. And then people for a minute should breathe through only the straw. After 30 seconds, half of the room spit out the straw. And I said to them, why? I said, listen, I can't do it. It's impossible. I said, that's how your patients are feeling like, not every minute, but every minute of the entire life. And that established a sense of empathy. Suddenly people say, I get it. I get it. I get it what you're thinking about here. And it helped R&D to change the way they're doing innovation. It helped the sales rep to change it. It helped our entire communication. The entire organization was redesigned around empathy. And this is my point here. This is common sense, right? It's pretty straightforward what I'm doing here. But I think the issue right now is we forget about it because we become so absurd of seeing the world from inside out rather than from outside in. And I think, unfortunately, COVID-19 is pushing that because it's so nice to sit in front of the screen and not getting in touch with reality because it smells out there. It's difficult. I have to travel or whatever. But through that, we also lose contact with empathy. So we have to constantly have those two things in balance. So don't forget, the people paying your salary is not the boss, it's the customer. And that is where we have to start this whole process of bringing back, in my opinion, common sense.
Well, that is the perfect ending to a perfect interview with Martin Lindstrom. I do miss the opportunity to sit across from you, and whether you smell or not, Martin, it doesn't matter to me. The humanity of being in the same room to me is particularly important.
Likewise.
I want to make sure, thank you. I want to make sure that you know both of us have books coming out soon. And Martin, who has a million things on his plate, was kind enough to take the time today to support my book launch by allowing me to talk. Well, he didn't even ask for this. I wanted to have you know about his book launch. The Ministry of Common Sense is available. You can go to his website right now, martinlindstrom.com. You can order this book. Its releases in January. My book is something you can order right now by going to strongerthroughdversity.com. I think the commonalities between the two is that Martin is helping you understand what you need to get rid of, where is the waste, where is the value, how do you move your organization forward to use common sense as a guiding principle to create engaging, meaningful, memorable, powerful human experiences. My book, I hope, is listening to leaders around the globe who have weathered this storm, who have done many of the things that Martin has suggested, out of necessity of the pandemic, not necessarily out of the level of design that Martin goes through. I think many of the messages about empathy, we have tons on empathy, we have tons on compassion in our book, and I think it was a real pivotal time for great growth in leaders, and I hope it continues so that we are stronger through adversity. I beg you to go and get to Martin Lindstrom's website, buy the book, The Ministry of Common Sense. If you had one of these two books to buy, I would buy The Ministry of Common Sense. If you have an extra
No, don't say that.
No, it's true.
Not mine.
Let's hope that the people have at least $15 more and they can go and buy mine as well. I am honored to have join me today, Martin Lindstrom. Let's do this again sometime when we're not talking about books and we're just wanting to talk about, somebody like Alfred Hitchcock or something like that.
Absolutely. And
Chickens. We got to remember the chickens. Thank you very much, everyone. Please join me for upcoming episodes as we talk to some amazing leaders up ahead, whether that's John Spence, Chester Elton, Carmine Gallo. There's so many people who are kind enough to give their time. None more important or exciting than Martin Lindstrom. Again, thank you for being here, Martin.